Noel Batchelor from the Parks Department. Um, he took over for the last person. We've had quite a few recreation representatives, and I think being part of the Parks Department is going to really be valuable for us. He's had a tremendous amount of experience across the state in several roles, but currently he's with Parks. And I thought, Noel, I would give you a chance to sort of introduce yourself, and then you'll hear a little bit about everybody else here in a second.
All right, sure. Sounds good. Hi, everyone. Noel Batchelor. I'm the ecologist or the Central Natural Resource Specialist with Oregon Parks and Recreation Department. I've been with state parks now for 21 years and had a 9-year career with the Forest Service before that, always in natural resources, mostly botany, a little wildlife and hydrology and stuff like that around the edges. Been a member of a few other committees in the past. I've been on the Oregon Invasive Species Council. I was a vice chair there for a year. Been on the Oregon State Agency Interagency Integrated Pest Management Coordinating Committee and various species and habitat working groups around the state. My role is statewide, been involved in stuff from east to west and north to south all over Oregon. And so have a wide range of experience with different habitats and project areas and partnerships around the state. Yeah, with that, happy to be here. Happy to give a voice to recreation and Oregon Parks and Recreation Department in this committee.
Well, no, we're really happy to have you with us. You fill an empty hole for us here, and hopefully you'll be able to stay with it. We've had a lot of turnover in that particular position, and I think that's impacted us. It's really nice to have a voice for recreation and on the committee. So welcome. I think you'll find we're a pretty remarkable committee in many ways. And speaking of remarkable, I'm going to start off by asking Srishti if she's all rested up and feeling pretty good about her fantastic victory and all the wonderful things that happened with recent 1% for Wildlife bill. Noel, Srishti was really number one in helping get that across the finish line. I worked incredibly hard, and we all owe her a lot for making that happen. So, Srishti, how are you doing these days?
Thank you for the very generous intro there. Slightly exaggerated, Noel, just to clarify. And nice to meet you. I am at the OCRF at large seat, but I work for Western Environmental Law Center, which is a nonprofit environmental law firm. And I'm based out of Gresham, Oregon. And to answer Carl's question, unfortunately, work never dies down. I learned that many years ago and still somehow foolishly believe that's possible, that it'll slow down at some point. It doesn't. But to answer the first part of the question with 1% for wildlife or 1.25% for wildlife, ODF&W did a remarkable job in putting that together as part of their budget. So it is part of the agency requested budget now. They spelled out how they were going to use the funds. If you haven't followed that, I highly recommend, because it's so encouraging to see. There is like total of 40 plus new positions between diversity biologists and habitat biologists, staff that ODF&W never had before, never had the capacity to have. So that's really wonderful to see. And there's a lot of specific species-specific investments as well as regional investments as well. So it's, yeah, I highly encourage you to see. It's a lot because it's a lot of money. So it's hard to capture it here. But I think we'll start to see what that means on the ground fairly quickly because of all the capacity that it is building. The agency budget was put in front of the ODF&W Commission for their approval in the June meeting. And the commission has approved it. So it's going to move forward now. So the next step or the next stop here is the governor's office to become the governor recommended budget, which doesn't come out till like about early December. So between now and December is to make sure that, the governor's office understands the collaborative process in developing the budget and that everybody's behind it. And so they should hopefully support it as is. So that's kind of the work ahead for us. And then the next and final step would be the legislature. So that's ongoing. The first round of funding is precedent setting in a way. So we want to make sure that it sets the right precedents, and also because it's a bucket of money we never had before, there are interests to pull it into different directions, and we want to make sure that doesn't happen also. So that's kind of the work cut out for us ahead, to make sure this goes through for the intended purpose of the bill itself. And after the first round, it kind of sets into its own motion of how this money will be used in the future. So we're very excited about it and grateful to have worked with ODF&W on that. And then on the other fronts, work-wise, I've traveled to Santa Fe recently. Beautiful. Enjoyed beautiful warm weather there, some of their cultural and like historical landscapes around, very beautiful there. And now I'm back here in my home, and I have the beaver behind my house as a mate now. So that's exciting. There's 2 of them now together. And the merganser behind my house, well, she had like 6 little babies till last week, and this week she has 11. So I think she just adopted a bunch from someone. So it's pretty fun to watch. That's it from me.
Well, thank you, Trisha, and thank for what sounds like your continued work on this. And I think we're fortunate that later today, Sarah Reif is going to give us a little bit of update about that very thing. Is that right, Sarah? Great. Yeah. So we'll get a little insight from her on what all's going on. So that's, to me, I think just a really great timing to get that input. Liza Jane, how are you?
Good. It's so good to see all of you. I missed you at the beach.
We missed you too. Sorry you couldn't have made it.
Yeah, long haul. That's a long haul.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting around here. We're in the middle of a river restoration project, continuing to reroute the Wallowa. So there's gigantic equipment and loads of boulders and loads of trees and, and rumors galore about the subdivision that we're building here. So it's really exciting, and they're working hard to try and get this done in record time so we can move it in that window that we have. So that's really busy. Last weekend, I was fortunate to, after probably a dozen years of pestering people, the Nez Perce Fisheries brought us some adult lamprey, and we got to release those on the ranch in the river. Really cool. It happened to coincide with the first day of a veteran women's fly fishing retreat that we hosted. So those women got to also participate in the release, and my grandkids, my grandson. So that's special. Let's see. I got to fish on the Blackfoot. That was pretty fun up at Ovando. That was a new place for me, and fishing was really, really fun. And then another project is a 1 acre on the ranch here. It's a wildlife, I'm calling it a wildlife orchard. You can call it a shelter belt if you want, but I think it's an orchard for wildlife plus pollinator habitat, and it'll be in a 1 acre piece. So that's a lot of learning for me, and pretty cool project going on. And other than that, it's irrigation and fence and weeds and, the stuff we do. So all's good.
Well, thanks, Liza Jane. It's great to see you. And we did miss you at the coast. It was a great meeting.
Yeah. And the yurts on the beach. It sounded awesome.
Mark Stern, looks like you're traveling.
Just running around town a little bit today, but last month or so we spent a fair bit of time out in Eastern Oregon, out at Malheur some, and also helping my wife with a project out on Sylvie Island in the wildlife management area with ODF&W at the middle of the island, a place called Oak Island. There's a nature trail. And 10 years ago, she taught a class at Portland State with the Portland State students working with the Soviet Island seventh graders, and they made a nature trail about biomimicry. And biomimicry is sort of where you come up with an idea that's in nature and then sort of, in this case, use it, replicate it, or take that concept and maybe apply it to people. And so, for example, one kid had, frogs that had the little cushion suction things on the bottom of their paws, and he drew the bicycle tire that had all the little frog suction paws on it so the tire didn't slip. And another kid took a woodpecker skull, has some padding in it so that with all the wrapping, they don't injure their head, their brain, and took that concept and embedded it into a football helmet so that football players wouldn't do that. But the part we worked on is somebody had tagged the sign pretty prolifically, so we were trying to clean it, and that didn't work. And all the people who had worked on this were gone, but Ginny just happened to check her email, and it blindly came up with the company that had made the sign. And after a couple of weeks, she called the person up, and the woman, Lauren, in 30 seconds, oh, here's the invoice. Yeah, we can reprint that sign, no problem. And the wildlife area manager, Mark Nebaker, was all in on it. He said, yeah, we got it covered. And so after scraping, priming, and painting the whole billboard and everything, and getting another friend out there, teetering on ladders, getting paint on ourselves, we put the sign back up, and it actually looks great. So that was part of our effort. And it's kind of neat because it has QR codes on the signpost. So you don't have to carry a paper nature guide around to see all 30 vignettes that the different seventh graders wrote. So it's been a work in progress for a while, but check that box off now.
Well, Mark, thanks for pulling off the road to meet with us today. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'll be back on the computer later in the meeting. I just had to do something in the moment here.
Great. Well, Kelly, how's the coast?
The coast is warm today. It's very warm out here. I'm probably preaching to the choir of places where it's hot, but it's relative to the coast. It's warm, but it's gorgeous, beautiful, big skies. We just pulled off the Wild and Scenic Rogue River yesterday, so we left Thursday. We spent all 4th of July weekend up there. Gorgeous, 90s, hot, beautiful, just kids swimming all day long and enjoying ourselves. And it was just beautiful. It was a great flow. It's pretty low right now. It's like 1400. So that was pretty nice though. Made all the features a little less featureless. Saw some springers jump in, hoping some for some early summer steelhead should be moving around here in a little bit too. And yeah, since I last talked to you guys, we put a whole project on the ground too. We did an 11-acre off-channel rearing habitat down here in the Rogue Estuary. So I can relate to Liza Jane. A lot of people are like, oh, are you building condos? It's like, no, not in the floodplain. We're not putting condos in. But lots of talk about that. And then finished that up and went to Wyoming to visit my husband's family and did Yellowstone and saw all the bison and grizzlies and, just, it's been a whirlwind of a last month. So it's been all fun and a lot of outside time and a lot of hard work and a lot of hard play. So I'm happy.
Kelly, as usual, your life sounds wonderful. That's great. Your kids are very lucky to be able to
We tell them that every day. You call them and tell them that, Carl.
So for all
I've been watching a lot of World Cup too. I was going to see if anybody else was World Cupping out here, but it's been so fun. Yeah.
I was going to say, as for all you soccer fans, you all didn't know, but we have a Ronaldinho here today. You see him right there in your screen. What do you got to say, Ronaldinho?
I'm gonna go ahead and assume it's me. Yes. Well, hello. It's good to see everyone. And yes, that World Cup has been a big part of my life in the last couple of weeks. I just came back from Miami from a big family reunion. It was about 32 of us, and every Colombia game, and including the one that's playing right now, was a huge event, and we got to explore a little bit of the peninsula, got to take the girls to the botanical gardens. They got to feed flamingos and all kinds of beautiful animals down there. And before that, I had the privilege of going and support a documentary for a Black-owned organization out of Beaumont, Texas, that is trying to get Black and brown folks into STEM careers, particularly in environmental science. And that was a wonderful opportunity to learn about both the ecosystems, the dynamics of the human interaction with nature in that part of the country, and also other ways to support ways to diversify the field. So it's been a lovely few weeks, and hopefully in about 75 minutes, it's going to be a lot better with Columbia making it into the next round.
All right. Well, thanks, Mauricio. Hey, Reva, why don't you catch up for us?
Hey everybody. Well, I guess recently went to Redmond for the commission meeting and got approval for the 19 projects that you all recommended at your May meeting. So that was a good trip. And also recently onboarded Taya, a new OCRF student intern, and she's here on the call. And she's working on sorry, there was just some feedback. She's working on the OCRF program story map. So that's been pretty exciting to onboard her and see how that project's going. Other than that, I've been spreading a lot of bark chips in my backyard the past few days.
Gardening time.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Jane, I bet you're doing a lot of gardening right now, or selling people to the plants that are going to do a lot of gardening.
Well, both of those. And I'm sorry, I'm having technical difficulties. My internet was down, and so I joined on my phone, and then the sound was coming through my watch. And I just now got it up on the computer again. I don't know how long it's going to stay. And it looks like my picture's not coming through. Anyway, it's going to be one of those days. So bear with me. And yeah, everything is great, except for technology. And that's all I'll say. That's my time taken up.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. Let's see who else we have here. Jim Hammett.
Well, it's hot here. I think it went up to about 96 today, and it was nice and cool yesterday at 75. So I think summer's finally here. But the John Day River is the lowest I've ever seen at this time of year. Probably a lot of it's the irrigators, but a lot of it's just the fact there's not much water up in the hills that come down. But and there was a lightning bust down in the vicinity of Burns Junction, Jordan Valley, in the upper Basin and Range province last night. Thousands and thousands of strikes. As far as I know, only one is showing up as a fire right now, but they have a tendency to show up a little bit later. But we'll see how that turns out. Let's see. Last week I got a wild hair and decided to walk backpack from the west side of the Strawberry Wilderness to the east side, and I bit off a little more than I could chew, but I did make it. I just didn't realize that there hadn't been any trail maintenance in 2 decades since I was last in there. And they're losing those trails. I mean, they're just kind of gone. Without a GPS, you can't even figure out where they might be. But it was a great experience. I enjoyed it. It was certainly a wilderness experience. I didn't see another person. But I am concerned about the Forest Service neglect of the trail system. So that gave me a project to work on. So I've written a few letters and worked on that. But anyway, that's pretty much my my story for the last month.
Well, thanks for that. We had a similar lightning event right near our house. It was unbelievable and not a drop of rain. And so far so good, but man, there were thousands of strikes, and unfortunately that storm blew a tree over onto my son's car in the driveway. So that was, we've been dealing with that. That's what I've been dealing with lately. I do have one thing to share with you all about another one of the amazing things that's happening in the Klamath Basin. Kelly mentioned springers. And historically, the springers were the main run in the Klamath River, and they all came up to the Klamath and spawned in the rivers and actually hung around in the system quite a long time. That was the natural history of it. And that run is extinct. That the summer run of Chinook on the Klamath is pretty much extinct. There's a few fish that still go up the Trinity and the Salmon River, California salmon, but for the most part, it's functionally extinct. Well, in 2023, ODF&W got some hatchery spring fish from Trinity, tagged them, let them go in the tributaries to Upper Klamath Lake, the Williamson, the Sprague, Crooked Creek, maybe 1,000, a little more than 1,000 fish. I got to help do that just to see what would happen. This was before the dams came out. This was to see if they would survive, if they could make it, because the springers would hang out here quite a long time. And the great news was they did. They survived the lake. They traveled all over the place, went from one river to another. Fishermen were catching them in Rocky Point, and it all was great. And then we got the word that one of the pit tags showed up at the mouth of the river, way down 200 miles away at the coast. And it was like, whoa, how did that happen? We still had dams up. You know, they had to go through turbines to get down the river. There's no fish ladders going either way on those dams. It was like, wow, a fish showed up. And then shortly after that, a second one showed up. So everyone thought that was amazing. That was back in 2023. Well, on June 3rd of this year, one of those fish showed up at Keno Dam, which is the first dam after coming up through the sections where the dam removed. People were quite amazed at that. But 3 days later, he was in the Link River, which is the river that leaves Upper Klamath Lake. A week later, he's in the Williamson, which is one of the major tributaries and presumably a major springer spawning area back in the day. So here we have this heroic fish makes his way all the way to the ocean, turns around and comes back. And that just shows what's possible out there. And people are quite excited about it. We may be able to reestablish a springer run here in the Klamath Basin. So just thought I'd leave you all with that. That's pretty great. Pretty great news. So did I miss anybody on this? I think I got everyone. Well, okay. Well, thank you all. It's always wonderful to hear what everyone's doing, and very gratifying to seeing how diverse all our lives are. And again, Noel, I think you'll find we just have a remarkable group of people on this committee. So, all right, Reva, is there, you want to recognize the public? Is that something time to do that?
It is, yeah. So I see we have today Valerie Hinojosa-Rude. Thank you for joining. Jeremy Austin. And we have our presenters, Megan Jones. Thank you for joining, Megan. I see Paul Slater, also a presenter for today. Thanks for joining, Paul. Allie Webb, and I believe that's it. But yeah, thank you everyone for joining today's meeting. We appreciate you spending time with us today and your interest with the OCRF program. And then, of course, we have Taya Fukuhara. Forgot to recognize her. Also, our new OCRF program student intern. So thank you, Taya, for being here. All right. I think that's everybody.
Yeah, Taya's working on what might be, I hope, some really exciting stuff. She seems very savvy in what she's doing and is going to help us tell the story a little bit better. And so we really appreciate her being here and taking part as our intern. That's really a valuable thing, and we all appreciate it. Okay, so our first actual work order of business is to review and approve the minutes. Can we get a motion on that?
I move to approve the May 5th, 2026 meeting minutes with the continued authority to correct spelling, grammar, and punctuation.
Great. Can we get a second?
All right, second.
All in favor? All right, great. Well, that's done and out of the way. So I hope you all got the email, the exciting emails about a wildlife crossing project. As you all know, we've had a significant allocation of funds, $5 million of a bond for wildlife crossings, but there were stipulations in that bond that made it difficult to spend. The need is certainly out there, and we learned that on our visit to Subtle Lake in Central Oregon, but we just had too many constraints. Fortunately, thanks to hard work of some ODF&W staff, they found a very appropriate opportunity, and Riva sent out all of the details. We're going to have a presentation from them on the Trans-Pacific Parkway Wildlife Crossing project. I'm really looking forward to that. And then later on in the meeting, after we've had time to digest that, we'll make a decision. I hope all of you also saw the email Riva sent out, I think this morning, about the Polensky crossing and all the frogs making it across, and what 30 different species of different critters that are using that Polensky wildlife crossing. So, I think it's easy to think, okay, roads are roads and they're killing animals all the time. There's not much we can do about it. But it looks like maybe that's not the case. And if we can really go big on this in the future and have some great demonstration projects like we've had, we can really, that can make a huge impact, and hopefully we'll be able to expand in the future. So Riva, thanks for sending out that info on the Polensky crossing. That was really gratifying to see that. So with that, we have Paul Slater and Rachel Weed. Is Rachel going to be the presenter on this, Riva?
Yeah, I think Rachel's going to be the presenter, our wildlife connectivity coordinator, and then Paul Slater with Coos County Public Works is also here to answer any questions. If you guys are ready, I think we can I can stop sharing and you guys can take it away if you're ready.
Yeah, sounds good.
I'm ready if Rachel is.
All right, so appreciate everyone being here this afternoon. As Riva mentioned, we're going to be talking about the Trans-Pacific Parkway Wildlife Crossing Project, and this is an opportunity to help us spend the remaining lottery bond revenue that we have available. Again, I'm Rachel Wheat. I'm the Wildlife Connectivity Coordinator here with the ODFW. And we also have Paul Slater, who's the Coos County Public Works Director / Roadmaster for Coos County. The species of interest here, our target species for this effort is the coastal Pacific martin. It's one of the species of greatest conservation need in Oregon. It's a mustelid, so it's a member of the weasel family. And the particular population that we're talking about here is the distinct population segment of coastal Pacific martin that exists at about 71 adult individuals is all in two populations that are separated by the Umpqua River. So there's about 40 adult individuals north of the Umpqua and about 30 adult individuals south. This is one of our top 5 priority species greatest conservation need in the Coast Range ecoregion. It is on both the state endangered species list and the federally endangered species list. It is a federally threatened species. Obviously, it's a very small population. And this is we have a significant concern with this species of road mortality. So when the listing decision was made for the federal ESA listing back in, I believe it was 2018 or 2019, one of the reasons cited for listing the species was actually concern about road mortality. So this species is susceptible to road mortality. And as a result, we've had a number of partners that have been interested in trying to identify opportunities to improve road crossings for this species in that area, in that coastal distinct population segment. And so this has included Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. Obviously, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has an interest in this species as well. And then we have some of our federal land managers on the coast that manage lands, Bureau of Land Management and U.S. Forest Service, as well as Oregon Wildlife Foundation. And all of these organizations came together to form a work group to try to identify if there were opportunities for road mitigation within the sort of population area of this species. And what ended up happening was the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service was able to secure some funding to get a contractor to do some work to do an assessment of road mortality for this species along its population distribution on the coast. They looked at things like documented road mortality for the species, as well as documented observations of the species, land ownership, topography, and they really focused in on these 7 sites that you can see here on this map, largely along US 101, but then there's also site number 7 you can see here at the bottom is along a roadway called the Trans-Pacific Parkway or Trans-Pacific Lane on this map. So the focus is on these 7 sites specifically and evaluating the existing road surface and, again, adjacent land usage to try to figure out if there are techniques that we can apply that will help mitigate the impact of roadways on this species. Paul, I think, can jump in here with a little bit more information about the Trans-Pacific Parkway specifically.
Yeah. So Trans-Pacific Parkway became a county road in 1987. Right-of-way width varies from 100 to 150 feet. Within that same right-of-way, there's also a railroad, the Coos Bay Rail, part of the Coos Bay Rail Link spur that goes out to the North Spit. It's actually one of our widest road right-of-ways in the county road system. Traffic counts out there right around 4,000 vehicles a day. A large percentage of that is truck traffic in the form of, your typical 18-wheel trucks. Trans-Pacific is on the National Highway System due to its significance for trade and defense. In 2020, I think it was 2020 or 2021, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service first reached out to us about the marten and wanting to take a look and see if they could do some monitoring out there, put up some cameras, particularly in the structure that Rachel will probably point out here in a bit. And then they did send us the results of that, and they did find some use out there. So I'll let Rachel cover more of that information. So it's something we've been talking with other entities about for a while. In 2025, the county signed an IGA or an intergovernmental agreement with the Coos County Urban Renewal Agency for the county to oversee and administer a road rehabilitation project of the full extent of Trans-Pacific Parkway, which is a little over 5 miles long from Highway 101 out to the North Spit. The county solicited proposals in December of 25. We ended up hiring David Evans and Associates in February of 26 with a $1.8 million contract for design, permitting, and construction oversight of the road rehab project. DEA has completed some initial site visits, initial survey work, started looking at some of the archaeological research and wetlands and waters determinations so far. We don't have an estimated construction cost for that road rehab project, but just in the fairly recent past, both Rachel and some Fish and Wildlife folks, U.S. Fish and Wildlife folks, reached out to us, talking about wanting to do a wildlife project out there for crossings. And it looked like a great opportunity to dovetail the 2 projects together. And we're hoping with this funding, we can do that. We can do it with this funding if we're awarded the funding. Right now, that project is scheduled to be, the road rehab project was scheduled to be done by 2028, probably mid to late 28, depending upon, how things go from now to then. We believe we can dovetail this project into that. There's still some details to work out, but if we're awarded the funding, we believe we can fit the 2 together and put this project out as its own project first and do that work next year, and then do the actual road rehab the following. So that's about all I got for background.
Thank you, Paul. So one of the reasons that we're focusing on this site, on the Trans-Pacific in general, is this is actually the area with the highest marten road mortality densities along this subpopulation extent. So we've had 4 documented road kills of coastal marten over the past 7 years. So we're looking here now at an aerial imagery of the Trans-Pacific Parkway, and you can see the locations of these 4 mortalities. And 4 over 7 years certainly doesn't seem like a lot when we think in the context of, something like snakes, of which hundreds are killed a year, or deer, hundreds are killed a year. But with such a small population size of this threatened species, every road mortality actually does make a significant difference. There was actually some research that was done out of Oregon State University, basically a population sustainability model that showed that loss of even one individual a year could result in total extinction of this population within sort of the next 30 to 90 years. So this does seem like a pretty appropriate location to look at road mitigation for coastal marten, given the high densities of collisions that we've seen along this stretch of roadway. And so our proposal to help mitigate this is actually just to implement some crossing structures for marten. So we're proposing 3 new small wildlife crossings. These will probably be small pipe crossings for marten specifically. And then there's an existing stream conveyance culvert also in this stretch of roadway that we're recommending we replace with a larger structure that has some dry benches to facilitate passage. Alongside these, we'll have some sort of directional walls or barrier walls that will kind of link up all these crossing structures together to provide these opportunities for safe passage for marten and other wildlife. So as mentioned before, these 3 new small animal wildlife crossings, about 2 foot in diameter. We know from work done with marten elsewhere, so not coastal marten, but American marten and stone marten in Europe, other marten species, that they prefer using smaller structures. They prefer a more closed structures, so a little bit more security cover. So these would be 2 foot diameter crossings. They would provide dry passage to the species. Like a lot of our terrestrial wildlife, they really don't like getting their feet wet when they're using crossings, so they're not likely to use an inundated culvert. And then for that culvert replacement, the existing culvert is undersized. It needs to be replaced, and we're proposing that that be replaced with something like a 16-foot wide by 10-foot high box culvert, or maybe potentially a bridge. And that would also have benches for dry passage alongside, which in addition to potentially offering the opportunity for marten to cross, that would have a size that would allow medium and large wildlife to pass as well. So there's an opportunity here as well to increase passage for things like, our black-tailed deer that may be out in those coastal areas. And as I mentioned before, up to 1 mile of roadway on either side of the roadway connecting these structures, having these directional or barrier walls in place. And I have a little schematic for the direction/barrier walls. This is a cross section of the roadway, so you can see where the cars would be driving. And then here to the side, you can see these, they're called ecology blocks. They're almost like big concrete Legos. And we're proposing that we use these in particular to kind of act as the barrier or directional walls that would funnel wildlife to the openings of these new structures. And the ways these are designed is so that any animal that is on the road surface can very easily jump off and escape into safe habitat on the side of the road. But it's meant to serve as a deterrent for animals that are on the habitat side from getting up on the highway. Now, marten are super highly mobile individuals. They're very good at climbing and jumping. And so some of the traditional things that we may use, like fencing, is not going to be adequate for these guys. They can easily climb up and over fences. So we can't prevent marten from getting on the roadway without some really crazy engineering that's probably far outside the scope of this project or anything that we could gain funding for. But these ecology blocks are meant to serve as a deterrent, so make it just a little bit harder for them to get up on that roadway. This project aligns very nicely with the OCRF priorities as well as other state priorities in Oregon. So as I mentioned before, coastal Pacific marten are one of our species of greatest conservation need in our state wildlife action plan. They're one of the top 5 priority species for our coast range ecoregion. This addresses one of our state wildlife action plan key conservation issues, barriers to animal movement. Specifically, the goal in the barriers to animal movement key conservation issue about improving passage for wildlife across our roadways. This project is sited within PWCA, one of our priority wildlife connectivity areas, specifically the Coast Range Region 35. And it's also within a conservation opportunity area, the Coos Bay Conservation Opportunity Area. And fortunately, this project does meet the funding criteria and can meet the timeline of that remaining lottery bond revenue. So as Carl mentioned, we have struggled to identify projects that meet some of those strict criteria for spending these lottery bond dollars down, and this project does meet those needs. In terms of expected benefits, obviously, first and foremost would be reduced mortality risk for Coastal Pacific Martin. We're hoping that these structures will allow Martin to pass safely under the Trans-Pacific Parkway and reduce some of those road mortalities. But additionally, these crossing structures, as we've seen with Polensky, serve a diversity of species if you put them out there. So all those images on the right are species that have been observed in the habitat alongside the Trans-Pacific Parkway in this area that could potentially make use of these structures if they were implemented. So we do anticipate improved connectivity for a diversity of wildlife species. And the combination of the smaller 2-foot pipe culverts with the larger culvert replacement effort into a larger box culvert or bridge will also allow opportunities for connectivity for a diversity of species across a range of sizes. So everything from some of our really small-bodied species like shrews and salamanders all the way up to deer. Since there is a possibility to improve passage of deer, there are potential motorist safety benefits. If we can get deer to use that replaced culvert rather than cross over the roadway, we could potentially reduce collisions with motorists. And as Paul mentioned before, there's some potential cost savings and very opportune timing here since Coos County has already engaged into this existing road improvement effort for the Trans-Pacific Parkway. They already have David and Evans Associates on board, and this project could just serve as a natural extension of that effort. The funding request is $3.9 million. The largest piece of this pie is for the culvert replacement effort. Since that is a stream conveyance culvert, it's a larger project. It requires more engineering, more materials. And then I do have kind of a course breakdown here of the individual components. So we have those 3 new proposed pipe crossings, the north, middle, and south, and then the culvert replacement effort specifically. So we have factored in costs here for things like design and permitting, the installation of the structures, the installation of the associated barrier walls that goes along with it, the administration costs, and then all of the replanning and restoration effort that's necessary after those structures go in. We've added a 20% contingency. The costs that I'm displaying here are from a conceptual design report that was put together by the contractor that U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service hired to do that road assessment effort. They're based on 2025 dollars. The estimates were first published in February of 2026. And given the way that these projects always tend to go, and materials cost and inflation, we've added a 20% contingency just to give ourselves enough leeway there that as we progress into actually engineering design and getting these structures on the ground, that we have the funding necessary to actually implement this project. The timeline here, assuming that funding were approved by the OCRF Advisory Committee, we'd start working on the contract with Coos County as soon as possible. We'd anticipate having that contract in place by September, early October. And then throughout this fall and into next winter, we'd start working on engineering design for these structures, as well as getting all the permitting in place that's necessary to go to construction. We'd be looking to go out to bid for construction in spring in 2027 and aiming to do the construction through summer and fall next year. So summer and fall of 2027. That gives us a little bit of leeway into spring of 2028 to continue construction if necessary. And then that allows us to complete the construction of these.
We got feedback here somewhere.
Okay,
Jane, there's 2 of you, Jane. Is that where our feedback's coming from?
I think it's good for now.
Yeah, okay.
But either way, that gives us the leeway to complete the project. We have a little bit of sort of padding room there before that lottery bond spending deadline in April of 2028. And, just as a last kind of fun image, this is the image there on the right is a long-tailed weasel that we captured on a trail cam inside the Polensky Wildlife Crossing structure in June. So another mustelid, another member of the weasel family, using a structure that we were able to build with lottery bond funding just a couple of years ago.
Well, thank you very much for that great presentation. Rachel, I know you've worked extremely hard on getting this together and finding a place for that money to be put to work, or we could have lost it. So thank you so much for putting this together and presenting this to us. I know you've really done a lot of work on it. And I have to say that might be the cutest animal in Oregon with some of those pictures you showed. Pretty cool looking animal. Okay, well, great. I appreciate that. Does anyone have any questions for the presenters? And Paul, thank you really for being willing to consider this and including this in your project, because it's really important to us. And hopefully this kind of thing will be a normal thing. And as road projects get considered and put in place, this will just be part of the process, because we're showing how effective they can be. And hopefully with this, we'll be able to demonstrate that as well. So thanks for being part of this. Srishti, you have a question?
Yes, I had a couple of questions, but I'll try to be brief here. So Rachel, for the spot that you showed where there's like 4 known deaths over the last 7 years, when you compare that with the other sort of identified connectivity hotspots, like those 4 red lines, how does this fare in comparison to those in terms of like mortality? Are there known mortality in those areas? And the second question is around the structures themselves. For the connectivity, the culverts, is the goal or the design that the floor is more natural, like with rocks and stuff, as opposed to being concrete? And is there like canopy cover or any sort of cover structure built around those culverts?
Yeah, so for your first question, yes, there is documented mortality on those other 6 sites that were evaluated on US 101. The area on the Trans-Pacific Parkway has the highest density of collisions. So that's one of the reasons that we're targeting the site in particular. The second question, we haven't moved far enough in design yet to debate whether or not we need a natural substrate. We'll definitely be going to look at assessments of marten crossing use elsewhere to see whether or not a natural bottom is helpful for that species or not. From the few studies I have looked at so far, it doesn't seem to make a big difference for marten, but it can make a difference for other species like amphibians, for example. So that's definitely something that we'll consider as we move into the engineering process, as well as looking at that sort of security cover element. There's a lot of sort of natural shrubbery and grass growth in this area. And so that's one of the reasons that we've budgeted for that restoration at the project end, to make sure that we're replanting native vegetation and that it comes back in a way that helps facilitate wildlife use.
Great questions, Srishti. Who's up next? Is that Mark, or who's got the next? No,
It's like Liza Jane.
Liza Jane.
Thank you, Carl. Rachel, I'm in full support of this project. I just have a couple questions. I understood we had to be shovel ready, and I would have thought that the engineering would have to be done to be able to describe a project as shovel ready. So I want to be clear on that I was mistaken there. And then the other question is, because of our Wallowa County wildlife crossing process, Eastern Oregon contacted us, and they're putting cameras up for us at the sites. So we have pre-picture photos and then post to. I think that's really important to be able to continue to show the public and the funders that these really work and they're really important. Do you have anything like that in place? So there's 2 questions there.
Okay, so second question about the cameras. So we did have a contractor go out and do some pre-construction monitoring. So they did have cameras out on these sites. So we have photos of wildlife that have been using the area. In terms of post-construction monitoring, we feel that is incredibly valuable. Certainly, we've seen a lot of value of that with the Polensky Wildlife Crossing structure. The lottery bond revenue cannot be used for research or monitoring purposes. So that's not part of this ask specifically, because we can't use lottery bond revenue for that. There is an interest in it, and certainly, we're going to be having conversations with Bureau of Land Management, Forest Service, our regional ODFW offices, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, to figure out how we implement that monitoring component after the structures go in. So it's just a matter of finding out who has the capacity to do it and where we find the funding to do so, since we can't use the lottery bond revenue. So that's definitely super important. Can you remind me of your first question? I'm sorry.
It may be for Carl, actually, just helping me be clear. Yeah, shovel ready.
Right, the shovel
really-
ready, yes.
Yeah.
So it's, since we have the very strict spending deadline of the lottery bond revenue of April of 2028, we have to make sure that the project is achievable by 2028. So some of
Okay.
these larger scale projects, going through the engineering process and the permitting process takes enough time that if we weren't advanced to the engineering phase, we wouldn't be able to complete the project on time. This is a smaller scale effort. These pipe culverts are not as challenging engineering wise as something like a large bridge or an overpass, for example. And so, you know, we're fairly confident, especially given that David Evans and Associated is already engaged in going out, and they already done some sort of pre-scoping work on this roadway. We're confident that they can implement these structures before that funding deadline.
Thank you. That's clear. Appreciate that.
Mark Stern.
Yeah, Rachel, really nice project and very supportive of it. I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about what's the sort of pattern of land ownership there on both sides of the road, and is it sort of protected into the future? Or because I know the Port of Coos Bay, of course, partly what they want to do is develop industry in that area. So how does, we don't want to facilitate crossing into the new industry. So how does that puzzle come together?
Absolutely, yeah. So all of the land ownership west of the roadway in the area that we're looking is BLM. So that will be permanently protected. The land to the east of the structure is largely owned by the Port of Coos Bay. So there is potential there for future development, which is obviously something that we don't want. There's a lot of wetland habitat that's going to be significantly harder for them to develop than sort of, you know, a different substrate type. But even given the fact that we don't have that permanent protection on both sides of the roadway, the fact that this species is so imperiled and we keep seeing road mortalities in this area, you know, it makes it worth it for us to give them the opportunity to safely travel under that roadway, even knowing that in the future there could potentially be development on that west side. Or sorry, on that east side.
Yeah, that's helpful. And is the Port of Coos Bay generally supportive? I might have missed that earlier. Are they part of the conversation here?
I can answer that.
Thanks.
Yes, they are generally supportive of the whole project, both the road rehabilitation as well as this wildlife connectivity addition to it, as well as are the Coos County Board of Commissioners. They were very supportive of it.
That's great.
Paul, thank you for commenting on that. And that's something, you know, once you have these in place, that can inform future plans. Like you can have development, but do it in such a way that is not as impactful, and have that in combination with these already great structures. I mean, it's just another reason to pay attention to that. So thank you for your comments, and you can take that back to the folks in Coos Bay, and be wonderful to have a really solid population there in that somewhat subscribed area. You know, it's like you got the Coos River on the other side, and that's a very defined area, and maybe we could have a really healthy population there. So an exciting project. Thank you all very much for your presentation, and we'll be considering this in the second half of the meeting.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Rachel and Paul.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, I think it's time to move on to our second project, which I'm really interested to hear about. I mean, we have been funding beaver projects quite extensively, and this is going to be a report on a particular one that ODF&W has been involved in, and really look forward to hearing the outcome of that. Reva, you want to introduce all that?
I would love to. So we have up today, I've been trying to get them here for a little while, and I'm excited that they're here today. Megan Jones and Adrian Averett. So we have Megan Jones is the assistant professor with USGS and Oregon Cooperative Fish and Wildlife Research Unit, Oregon State University. I hope I got that title right, Megan. And then we have Adrian Averett, who's the statewide beaver coordinator at ODFW. They're talking about the Let's Talk About Beavers project, social science project. So we're excited to hear about it. And why don't I let you guys take it away if you're ready?
Absolutely. Thanks, Riva. And thank you all so much for having us here. Can I get a thumbs up, Riva, if you can see my screen? Thank
Looks
you.
great.
Really excited to be here with you all. Over 3 years since you funded this project originally, as we are wrapping it up this month. We only have 20 minutes to talk today. I feel like I could spend a whole hour talking about this. So please feel free to follow up with me if any of you have more, want to keep talking about beavers and talking about beavers. So we're focusing here on what we learned about tailored communication, trust, stewardship, and practitioner community in the context of promoting human-beaver coexistence. And as you all know, beavers can help buffer climate risks, but not everybody welcomes them on the landscape. They create all these spillover benefits for people and wildlife, but they also come with these costs and these trade-offs around managing property damage and the challenges of having them around. So we were really interested in this dual focus of coexistence, this combination of innovations to rein in beavers and bring in beavers, or as Brian, the postdoc on this project, calls it, get them or get rid of them. And as far as getting rid of them, there's a lot of non-lethal options related to culvert protection, beaver deceivers, fencing of trees and shrubs. As far as managing bringing them into spaces that they've been extirpated, it's things like planting alders and willows for them to eat, changing the stream with structures like BDAs so they might come in and maintain those streams moving forward. And our focus here was in recognition that timing matters. A lot of this is happening reactively, especially the conflict mitigation, but a lot of it is also happening proactively, especially the habitat restoration. And we also recognize that the benefits beavers can bring aren't universal, particularly when we have such dramatically different ecosystems on the east side and west side of the state of Oregon. So we designed the project to really try and think about the conflict and the restoration as these two sides of the same coin, and the geographic distribution and variability across the state of Oregon, capturing a lot of that in our approach here. And the question that you all funded us to go out and answer is around how can private landowners be supported to take coexistence actions that are mutually beneficial for their needs and for beaver populations in Oregon. So really trying to do some of the synthesis work across a lot of those kinds of projects that you all have funded previously, as well as that have been funded by other groups like OWEB and other sources. And we're going to break this down into 3 of the different takeaways from this project around behavior and trust and practitioner learning. But first, what did we do? We started with these semi-structured interviews, 23 of them with human beaver coexistence practitioners across Oregon's regions and sectors. So folks in the state agency, in county level, in nonprofits, in even for-profit businesses. And Brian interviewed all those folks in depth. We then brought some of them together in a community of practice over a 6-month period online. We offered to bring people together in person, and folks didn't want to do that, but we were able to bring folks together from all across the state virtually. And then we analyzed these 2 social data sets to figure out what we could learn from it. And so the outputs from that so far include 3 peer-reviewed open access publications, 2 of which are freely available online already, one's in review, 4 presentations so far. This is the 5th. We can do more and hope to do more. A funder report to ODFW and UAL that's in the works, and then some bonus activities that we ended up having some opportunities to expand beyond what we originally intended that I can talk more about if you're interested in. So what did we learn in this project about what drives coexistence behavior? I encourage you to think of yourself in the position, and maybe some of you are in the position, of the landowner who might be managing conflict non-lethally or promoting beaver habitat on their land, and like what might hold you back from taking some of these actions. You probably didn't think of the COM-B model of behavior change when you were mulling that question over, but we found this framework super helpful in making sense of the dozens of things that practitioners in Oregon said that they are talking about with private landowners in these conversations. So they're thinking about, does the landowner know what behaviors are available to them? Do they have the skills to take action? They're thinking about the environmental context. Are they even in a place where non-lethal conflict mitigation makes sense, or where habitat restoration is possible? the social context matters too. You know, what are your thoughts about what your neighbors are going to think about what you do on your land, or how they'll be affected by what you do on your land? And then also these goals, beliefs, and emotions that might be constraining the landowner from acting, or ideally, you know, encouraging them to take coexistence actions. So the insights from this part of the project were really twofold: that practitioners are listening really proactively for where landowners are at on these three different buckets, and then tailoring their messaging accordingly to meet landowners where they're at and kind of build them up in whatever domain they need support with. And they use a whole variety of communication channels to interact with landowners. This is a table that we have in our free open access publication, but really consistently practitioners emphasize that interpersonal, face-to-face, on the ground, one-on-one interactions are where coexistence happens, and often through repeated conversations. So that's what allows them to do that dynamic interaction of listening and tailoring messaging accordingly. We've taken these results to develop a toolkit, which we'd like to share and test more with folks, synthesizing what they told us down into these 7 questions across these 3 different domains, in the hopes that it can help folks be more systematic in how they do this listening and tailoring, but also maybe help new folks who are still coming into the beaver space. The second thing we looked at was this trust building element. We didn't actually ask about this in our interviews. This came up from the practitioners themselves, that they just emphasized this so emphatically that we had to look into it. And we found 60 different tactics that practitioners say they're using to build trust and relationships with landowners, which is a lot. And 3 insights come out of that. The first is that practitioners in Oregon working on human-beaver coexistence know trust and relationships are important. It's not, does trust building matter? It's, how do we do this work well? To do it well, they are building trust throughout the adaptive management cycle. So at the planning phase, at the doing phase, and at the learning phase of a project, sort of cyclically. And they're navigating tensions surrounding these trust building tactics. You can imagine that if there's 60 different things you could be doing all at once, like they're not always going to be pulling you in the same direction. You might be, and sort of there's a tension between emphasizing your own capability, for example, as a practitioner, versus emphasizing that you understand how capable the landowner is when it comes to doing these things themselves. I want to pull out one thing as well from the second piece here, which is that of the 60 different tactics that practitioners shared with us, over half of them are happening at the planning stage before any coexistence action is taking place on the ground. So really just emphasizing that foundational relationship work that occurs before non-lethal conflict mitigation or habitat restoration is able to take place was really profound to see come out of what these folks were sharing. The last thing we were interested in is, this is an applied project, you know, what fosters learning for these folks? It doesn't matter if I learn how all this cool stuff, it matters if they're learning and how they're growing and developing and getting better at coexistence work over time. So we had this community of practice model built into the project from the beginning. It ended up being these 12 hours that people came together, 11 practitioners over 6 months. And we facilitated this to really try and help them learn from each other, learn from social science of communication, and build relationships. And we were able to see these outcomes come out of it. So there was a stronger, we sort of monitored and tracked how people were progressing from the beginning, middle, and end of the community of practice. And every practitioner maintained or grew their network in the community of practice. On average, they developed 2 new connections per participant. And this was really important for folks. One person in the community of practice said that, I just really appreciate both of you creating this space for us to have these discussions and see ourselves as individuals, as part of this larger community that can build resources and solutions together. We also saw increased practitioner learning across a variety of different communication skills. One person here on the screen really flagged storytelling. They said, one thing that I heard today was that people use the act of storytelling a lot when they're responding to beaver conflicts. And I want to hear about those stories because I think that the more stories you have in your toolbox, the more experiences you can share with others and that can be implemented in real life situations. So the power not only of having your own stories to share, but having other people's stories that you can pass on and motivate other people. The last thing that we noticed in the community of practice was this capacity shortfall. Folks were really excited to participate and really didn't have a lot of bandwidth to do so. One person noted that I'm really coming to appreciate how the whole idea of communication as a strategy is way outside my ability to effectively implement on my own in a big way, since I have neither the funding nor the time for it. My dream would be a Beaver-based communications team that helps us all implement these various communication realizations. So I've been thinking a lot about where we go from here. We've got this practitioner community of working on beaver coexistence in the state that's thinking really, really thoughtfully about listening to landowners and meeting landowners where they're at. They're building trust in these really sophisticated ways. They're interested in engaging with these networks to build their capacity over time and keep getting better. What do they need moving forward? And so that's where I want to leave you all today with some ideas that are in my head about future needs. So the first one that emerged from this project is just this opportunity to continue accelerating and sustaining practitioners' skills at coexistence communication. Like, they are practicing a craft here, and that craft is learned through trial and error, through experiences out on the ground and through hearing each other talk. So there's an opportunity for more short-term community of practice interventions to help them build their storytelling and have that structure for it. There's also opportunities here to scale up one-on-one communication to do landscape scale restoration. This was the biggest sort of questions lingering in my mind, is because practitioners were so insistent that one-on-one interaction is how you do coexistence work. But we all know that landscape scale restoration in Oregon is a shared goal that a lot of people have. So how do we bridge that scale gap? A couple of ideas in my head are around, can we work, could there be a team across organizations where different practitioners are trying to craft new messages and tailor and test them and sort of actually measuring the effects of their communications and then sharing that across the team and doing that sort of more systematically? There's also seems like there's opportunities to help practitioners support community champions so that they have that capacity outside the organization and in the community where people are sharing the word about beaver coexistence. And some of this is happening already, but could that be more scaled up even more? And then the last thing is this capacity to monitor and evaluate social data, this idea that like they have ecological data about the work that they're doing, but they don't necessarily have social data about the effects of communication on landowners, and as that like critical precursor to some of the ecological and species level outcomes that people are looking for. So I could see some really exciting work here about helping them build those systems internally, and then maybe even discussing that as a community of practice and sharing the learning across teams and organizations. So as you can tell, I can never get tired of talking about this, but I'm going to let Adrian bring us home here with talking about how ODFW is already using some of the findings and outcomes of this project.
Thank you, Megan. Hello, everyone. One of our other goals through this project, if you remember from the proposal, was integrating the results and products into our Beaver Action Plan. And ODFW's current 3-year Beaver Action Plan is supported by 4 goal-oriented pillars of action. Pillar 1, data and science. Pillar 2, beaver habitat restoration. Pillar 3, beaver management. And Pillar 4, beaver coexistence, outreach, and communication. And so this collaborative project with Megan and OSU was integrated into our 3-year Beaver Action Plan at the conceptualization stage as an explicit priority action that we saw not only for our outreach and communication pillar, but also a thread that organically wove through our other pillars as well and is critical to their success. And so we just wanted to better understand effective strategies for communicating with and supporting the private landowners we work with on beaver coexistence issues and solutions. And so that front end integration didn't stop there at just like building it into the plan through our collaboration during the duration of this project. And also myself is participating in the community of practice. It really has supported our plan implementation activities across all 4 pillars. And so I'll just do some storytelling and provide you of some of those examples today. The one example I'd like to start off with is just through the community of practice, as Megan mentioned, we had lots of discussions about COM-B and trust-based frameworks and actively listening and supporting each other in this work. And so it was really helpful to have those strategies and think about how we could integrate them into our work that we're doing. And one thing that ODFW facilitates is a Beaver Action Plan partnership. And the purpose of that partnership is to share implementation progress we're making on the Beaver Action Plan with practitioners, but also learn about similar work our partner practitioners are doing and or challenges they're also facing in this beaver habitat restoration and coexistence or human beaver conflict realm. And so through the tools that have been added to our toolbox, we have strengthened our Beaver Action Plan partnership communications by listening to participant feedback on the partnership meeting format and content and creating space for folks to provide that feedback to us. One example is we developed a tailored survey to collect input. Partners were telling us we want in-person meetings. We need some training. We really don't understand this beaver fish passage guidance application forms. Like we feel like we need more training that when we do a project can help us get all of our permits in place and get through the application process. So we tailored a survey just to collect that information and get more details about what they were looking for. And this spring, we actually kicked off for our first Beaver Action Plan partnership meeting, a fish passage workshop. We had, I think, about 80 people online and 22 people in the room for that workshop in early May. And it was not only to provide fish passage rule guidance training for beaver coexistence structures and habitat restoration actions, but it also gave us an opportunity for the 20 in-person folks, for all of us to get out in the field together, in the room together, so to speak, and get out there and talk about some of the rules and the guidance and work and showcase 3 practitioner projects in the Corvallis area that focused on beaver coexistence or beaver habitat restoration, and really use that as a full afternoon learning lab opportunity to share information. What worked? How did we fail forward? How can you navigate the application process? And, you know, what are some novel tools that we would like to build together or co-produce together in the future? We're also expanding our community of practice. As Megan mentioned, those of us in the community of practice made new contacts. And so we expanded our networks. And I'm working with a lot of folks in that community of practice on other projects. And our staff are working with them on other projects. We're doing pub talks together to get beaver coexistence information out. We're looking at other ways to get in the field together to do beaver surveys. And those are just some examples of, like Megan mentioned, you know, we're all capacity strapped. And so how can we support and lift each other up in this work and really keep those community of practice nodes and neural network firing since we left the meetings last year. We're also looking at ways we can support each other as community champions. Like I said, whether that's working on projects together in beaver emphasis areas, or for example, ODFW helping partners on their technical assistance on beaver coexistence projects, or habitat restoration projects that they're applying for through like OWEB and OCRF, providing that in-kind match to support our partners in the field when they go to implement those projects. And then, so that's just how we've integrated it through the first Beaver Action Plan. And that thread continues as we think about how we shape the development of the Beaver Action Plan version 2.0 actions, and integrating that into the development of the plan, but also using COMBI, the trust framework, our communities of practice, this community champions idea to help ODFW track beaver coexistence communications on the landscape. And we can use COMBI and the trust crib that Dr. Jones mentioned to assess and tailor our beaver coexistence communication efforts. Are there opportunities that we can explore with Megan and OSU on training workshops for our staff, for other partners in communication? As most of you know, a lot of us didn't get into this because of the human side. So where are there ways we can add to our human or social-sided toolbox to help not only coexistence for beaver, but these are tools that are transferable to other coexistence efforts for other fish and wildlife species that we're working on in the state. And are there also ways to build in metrics to track our communication success? Whether the tools and resources we're developing, are they helping practitioners? Are they helping landowners? And one idea that Megan and I have been brainstorming with our contractor working on our beaver habitat guidance manual is how can we add metrics of impact to that guidance manual just to see how far is it being distributed, which landowners are using it, which practitioners, what's helpful. We haven't formed any final solutions on that, but these are just some under the hood conversations that we're having on, we're building this tool. It'd be really cool to track its distribution on the landscape, how it's being used, how we can improve it in the future to support the work that we're all trying to do. And so hopefully that gives you a sneak peek into how we've implemented it and applied it in the work that we do and the work that we hope to continue to do with our partners across Oregon to really scale up beaver habitat restoration work and coexistence work at the landscape scale. And final slide. And I think Megan and I would both, thank all of you, gratitude to the Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund, staff at ODFW, and all of our practitioners who really contributed their time and insights to this project. Up to this point and moving forward.
Adrian, thank you very much for that. I have one quick question. You keep referring to the practitioners without crossing any privacy lines. Can you identify who are these practitioners? I mean, when you refer to practitioners, are these folks in the nonprofit sector, or who are they?
So
I can take
I'll let Megan answer because she has the the most data.
Yeah, so all of the 11 practitioners who participated in the community of practice said that we could share their names publicly and their affiliations. We can't share the names of folks who did the interviews for human ethics reasons, but so it's folks like folks at nonprofits like ONDA and other folks at folks at Project Beaver, folks in soil and water conservation districts, in watershed councils, and this ODFW folks. So we're all the core community of practice, and then kind of bringing out from that in the interviewees. So a lot of the nonprofit folks, some of the state agency folks, as well as the soil and water conservation district folks, and a few private entities.
I know there'd been some efforts to try to organize that practitioner group on a more formal basis in the past. And was that part of the outcome of this, or are you envisioning that as so that you actually had a formal group that could get together and continue the conversation and bring more people into it?
Yeah, it's such a great question. People were really reluctant to commit time to something long-term that didn't have clear transferable outcomes to their own ongoing work. So I would say that the biggest thing that's been sustained since then is the one-on-one or smaller group collaborations that have come out from it that are more project specific. So I've got some work that I'm doing with Maureen Thompson, and I've got another project with Reese Mercer that we're both trying to, spin off. And I know Adrian has a few different collaborations with folks who participated in the community practice. And then there's been some sort of the lessons learned have been formalized, I think, in the Beaver Action Plan Partnership group, which is a regularly meeting group. And that's a great space for that to continue to be, for us to try new things in that space, I think.
Thank you. Liza Jane, you had a question?
Thank you, Carl. Did you include private landowners that are not agency? They're just private landowners for their participation?
We did not. No, we were interested in how folks on practitioners were talking with those folks. We didn't get to triangulate how landowners experienced the communication.
Okay.
But we did have some foundational landowner information from the Needham Mozilla work in 2011, the 2011 and 2015 pubs, of just how landowners themselves were feeling about beaver, incentives, how their tolerance to beaver differed for the east side versus west side. So we had some baseline information from that study that is over a decade or so old. What was nice about this was to layer up the next layer of it. So we have these this initial feedback from landowners, but then we have, like, thinking about building the cake, right? We have those practitioners that really are on the front lines, whether that's, ODFW or other agency staff, SWCDs, watershed councils, NGOs that are working one-on-one, day to day with landowners to navigate this space over time, and meet landowners where they are in a damaged situation or a long-term restoration project. And so that seemed like the next layer that could give us some real critical information about what that communication looks like.
Could I also ask a follow-up question? I'm curious, Liza, what would be helpful for you, do you think, for us to know about what landowners are thinking and experiencing here?
Well, if I understand, you're building trust. You need to build trust with private landowners that are having conflicts with beavers, correct? And if you only have information from one side of that relationship, it's pretty difficult to know the issues currently that landowners have, or their reaction to it, or their reaction to the solutions that are available to really get to a solution. So I was listening and looking for our landowners. Do they have a voice here to help build the solution? And you used, it sounded like, Adrian, you used some that data that's older, you definitely are getting the experience secondhand, right? So from a agency person that's working with a landowner, but that could be very different information than directly from a landowner. And it's just critically important. I'm always going to be asking for that voice at the table, because we often make up stories about who landowners are, and they're probably as diverse as any group anywhere. And it's cool to see that you found differences from east side and west side, because I think the Beavers find differences as well. So yeah, I just am looking for that and would encourage that opportunity whenever you can. Did that answer your question?
Yes, I really appreciate that because, you know, we as folks doing social science, it was really like, who can we help here? And it was, let's help the people who are trying to help landowners. And so they were the focus of this project. And I think it might not have come through as well as it could in the outcomes here, but like they're deeply landowner centric. And I think to your point about every landowner being different, that was one of the big takeaways of why like the communication needed to be so tailored to the landowner, because it's like, I can't, you know, all the practitioners were saying like, I can't promote any sort of one size fits all human beaver coexistence solution. It's really about what the landowner needs, what their environment's like, what's possible there, what they already know, what their skills are. And so everyone is different, and I need to tailor my support accordingly. And then they were also, you know, talking here in the trust context about the landowners' perceptions of, we've got here in the yellow, like their perceptions of the threat and their coping potential to deal with the threat in the context of beaver damage, and really trying to take that seriously in order for them to have any credibility working with the landowners. So I think that they would probably agree with you entirely about the landowner's voice. We just didn't design it into this study. So I'm thinking about that as far as where we go next. Sorry.
Yeah, we're running pretty far behind here. I think we need to wrap this up. I think clearly everyone's really interested in what you're doing. It's really important. And I think Liza Jane's insight was really useful in helping move forward. You got to get the feedback from the landowners too. So thank you for the hard work you've done and for putting this presentation together. Really appreciate that. And look forward, hopefully, to hearing more about this in the future. So thank you all
so much for your time.
Thank you for your time.
So Reva, is this time for public comment? Is that what's next?
It is. Yeah, that's right, Carl. So if there are any members of the public who have joined today that would like to provide public comment, now would be the time. Just ask that you do it within about 3 minutes. You could either raise your hand or put a note in the chat.
I'm not seeing any.
Yeah, me neither. All right, we can close public comment for today.
Great. So why don't we take a break? We're really pretty far behind, but we'll just have to make up for it. It's 2:29. Let's try to be back by 2:37, 2:38-ish. Let's try to get things rolling, and we'll be back. Is that good? All right. We'll see y'all in a little bit.
Reva, we can see your email. You might not share screen.
Thank you, Sarah.
No problem. What's the score, Mauricio? 0-0. Okay.
Mauricio, did you watch that miserable game last night?
No further comment. Even with even with the newly established orange card in behalf of the United States, still didn't have much.
Well, I don't watch much soccer, but I watched that last night. I enjoyed it, but boy, were we outclassed.
I'm afraid so. It's been a very surprising World Cup. This morning, Egypt was pretty much taking out the world champion until the very last minute. This is not for the weak of heart. Those that follow most of the winners of the past cups have already been taken out by unlikely competitors. So this is one to watch.
Happens in every sport, and it's a good thing.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right. Well, I think we're pretty much back, and we can get this going here. We are very fortunate to have Sarah Reif here today. He's going to expand a little bit on what we were talking earlier about the budget and what the plans are for OCRF. And this is, I mean, for the department, and that's really important in the context of how OCRF is going to fit into that. Without further ado, Sarah, are you able to move ahead with that talk?
I can. Riva, following your lead, was there anything you wanted me to start with other than the I know one of the things that I was asked to speak about is what the department's plans are with regard to the TLT funding, but did you want to cover anything before I jump into that?
Actually, first up, we had just a quick budget overview, Carl. And then we were going to get a little bit more into the TLT specific budget allocations after the committee vote and discussion of the wildlife crossing project. Does that work for you, or would you like to skip ahead to the TLT? Carl, I think you're muted.
Yeah, they're chainsawing our tree apart out front. Mute myself. Okay, that's fine. I guess it is time to give a little OCRF update, but I'd really like to hear a little bit more about the budget that you're planning and the direction for the department and how that fits in with the OCRF. So is that the later one, Reba, what you had intended? Okay.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Is that all right with you? Okay.
Let's just do that. Let's just follow what you had planned. I didn't see Sarah's name down on the other one, so I just want to make sure she's able to give us that. OW.
No. I'm with you till as late as you need me to. So it seems like getting the approval or the vote on the project would be a good thing to do while we still have everyone.
Okay, great. Then let's the real quick thing on the update on the budget.
Yeah, so Reva, I think you wanted me to just run through this, although you could probably do it better than I could, of just where things stand in the current OCRF budget, y'all. And this is, I believe, this is after the 19 projects are obligated that were just approved by the commission. And so you're looking at about a remainder of $458,000 in the base program. And that includes the electronic licensing system where we sell our hunting and fishing licenses and where people can make an added donation to the OCRF. that includes, if you'll recall, the add back piece is that we decided to preserve as much funding as we could in the base program. We decided to utilize some of the Fishhawk Lake mitigation funds that the Oregon Wildlife Foundation holds for us that were set aside to do good things for OCRF, basically. So we decided to pay Riva's salary this year out of those Fishhawk Lake mitigation funds. And so that leaves you at about 458,000. There will still be some additional revenue that comes in through any donations, but that's just the current where things currently stand. At this point, you've spent out all of the general fund that was associated with the drought package from a couple legislative sessions ago. All of the federal ARPA, that's going way back, but that's all spent out as well. And then the 3.93 million is what is remaining of the lottery bonds, and from which your decision would pull if you decide to approve the proposed project on the Trans-Pacific Parkway. It would come out of the 3.93. Anything I missed on that, Riva?
That was great, Sarah.
Questions?
There is a donation slide if we wanted to go over that too.
Yeah, thanks. So again, the electronic licensing system, point of sale donations to OCRF. So this is when people are buying their hunting and fishing licenses or their wildlife area parking permit, their shellfish license, or their invasive species permits for their watercraft. All of this is, that they're provided with an opportunity if they'd like to donate. And there's a couple of different programs and opportunities that they can donate to. And for those that choose the OCRF, you can see there's been pretty steady income off of this across the last several biennia, which is amazing. The corporate private donations, that 1.3 million, that is in the past. Those have been incorporated into base program over the years and spent out. The Oregon Wildlife Foundation collects donations when you see the donate here button on ODFW's pages on materials relating to OCRF. The old Oregon is Alive webpage, there is the donate button. Those funds are held for us by Oregon Wildlife Foundation. Thank you very much to them. In the past, we've had some revenue that way, not much at the moment, but it certainly has been valuable in the past. So I think that's just there's usually a question about donations. So I think we just wanted to kind of cover where that has been. And the notable thing here again, to me, is just the kind of steady income through the electronic licensing system.
Yeah, this is really important, I think, for us to recognize. We're knocking on the door of $1 million through the licensing thing. And we keep talking about it, but we really haven't focused on trying to maximize that and communicating back to the folks that have given us that money. I think a lot of times it's just like, it sounds like a good idea and they check it and they don't really even know who we are. And I think we need to really include that in the conversation. A couple of people do have to leave around 2. So Riva, why don't we move on to the discussion about the Trans-Pacific Parkway crossing
That's
project.
good, Carl. Yeah. So I have, did you want to lead a committee discussion or?
Yeah, I just think, I think it's going to be hard to criticize this too much. I think some good points were brought up about it. It sounded like there's a fair amount of support, so I'll put it out there for people to have any questions or concerns or just how they view this particular project. I'm not seeing much. So, Mark Stern.
Yeah, I guess I would just chime in. You know, we've looked long and hard to find a project that would qualify for our funding. So I guess I'm pleased that there's an opportunity to put it on the ground here. That's our opportunity. So I would promote the idea that we accept this opportunity and go forward.
Thank you. Jim.
Yeah, I'm fully supportive. One of the things that I think of it as a desired future, anytime that a road is rehabbed or rebuilt or lanes expanded, that these things would be incorporated into that and they would be funded out of the road funds, because I think that's where it needs to come from. But to get there, I do think that anything that we fund, we need to stress the idea of reporting back at the success. I think that's the one thing that has impressed me is every time that one of these things is built, to see visually the species, the bears and the deer and everything that use it automatically. I mean, I think that's impressive to the public, and I think the public needs to get behind, the funding of this. But these things are so expensive that I just don't see how we can do it with the money that we deal with. I think it needs to be incorporated into road construction funds at the federal and state level. So toward that end, I sure support this, but I would encourage us to make sure that the results of this are demonstrated and distributed and promoted.
Jim, you just articulated exactly what I was thinking. It's like this is so important, and it's a lot of people don't think about it, and we've got to get this in front of people. And just looking today at the Polensky Crossing, I mean, you don't have to be a fan frog to just think that's super cool that you got these animals using those crossings. And so we have to leverage this, and if anytime that we have success, you have to get that out there. So anyway, thank you very much for your comments. Srishti?
I'll just echo what Mark Stern and Jim said. Like for me personally, I think the number of projects, connectivity projects that specifically cater to non-game species are so low that this is super impressive, and also another reason why I'm very supportive of this project. But to what Jim and you were saying, Carl, there is a state level conversation around this to figure out if we can have dedicated state funding for it through the transportation department and not necessarily through ODF and W. And that was a conversation we had during the 2025 legislative session by including a few $1 million ask in ODF and ODOT's budget, not ODF and W's budget, for wildlife crossings. And so unfortunately, with the failure of the transportation package, that did not move, but just an acknowledgement that there is a recognition that this needs to be incorporated in bigger planning projects of transportation and roads.
Oh, yeah, I'm muted. So what I was going to say, Srishti, if you decide that's something we ought to do, then I imagine we'll see it up for a vote here pretty soon. So thank you for your attention to that detail. Okay, so any other comments? I'm not seeing anybody else. Kelly.
I just had a quick one, and it was, I know permitting can sometimes be a bear or get hung up, so I didn't know. Again, I'm in full support of this project and agree with everything that's been said so far. But is there a world in which we need to say if permits are not obtained by a certain time that, we're looking elsewhere, or do we just kind of cross that bridge when we get there?
Yeah, I don't know if the folks working on this are aware of that. I guess they don't have the permits yet. Well, they must have some permits for the whole road deal. I mean, they're doing the whole road. So hopefully that's covered. Sarah, do you have any insight into that?
Trying to see if Rachel or Paul were still on.
I was gonna look at the staff
Where's
review
Paul?
form does talk about the permitting, which is not completed yet, but
Paul's here.
oh, go ahead, Paul.
I'm still on. So as far as permitting, the walls and the 3 smaller culverts, we believe, and David Evans has already kind of provided a little bit of initial feedback on that. We all believe that probably won't require any permits. It's the bigger structure that's the big permitting question. But we still feel like we can get it done in time.
Kelly, with you being on the ground like you are, you have that insight into what can.
That's great. I have fatigue from it because I'm currently still waiting on a permit to finish a project. So it's just like, oh, this is sometimes they linger, but it's okay. I mean, I think we still have time, and like you said, you're still a year out from getting that permit, so it is plenty of time to, if you guys are applying for all those at this point.
Okay, great. Again, some folks are leaving at 2. Reva, I think it sounds pretty good to me that we could move on to a motion.
All right. Put it up there for you.
So Reva has that up there. Does anyone would like to make a motion?
I'm happy to do it. I hereby move to approve the Trans-Pacific Parkway Wildlife Crossing project by Coos County Public Works, totaling $3.9 million in expenditure from the Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund's Wildlife Connectivity Lottery bonds.
Do we have a second?
I'll be happy to second it.
Great. Well, thank you all. All in favor? Let's see what you got.
Aye. Good job, Paul.
Looks
And
like
team.
it's unanimous. So that motion passes, and that is great. I'm very gratified that we were able to get that money on the ground. It was a wonderful thing to have gotten it in the first place. And we were able to fund some great projects with the other piece of it. And so I think overall, and Sarah, I hope you feel the same, that was quite a success. We kept the work up, and a great deal of thanks to Rachel for the work she did. I know she really beat the bushes and for good projects and passed over some that weren't appropriate. And so I think she deserves a lot of credit for this. So that's all great. Okay, let's see. So we voted on that. That's great. So I think where we are at, and some people are going to leave. We got through with that. Now we're doing pretty good time-wise.
Hey, this is Paul. Sorry to interrupt, but I got to get off the call now. But I just wanted to say thank you very much for awarding that funding. We look forward to doing this project with you guys.
Great. Well, thank you, and hopefully it all goes smoothly. And we look forward. And it's very important that we see some outcomes from it. So think about that in the future. Great. Well, thank you, Paul.
All right. Thanks. You guys have a good day.
All right. So wonderful. So now, again, I don't know how much of that mayhem you're hearing in the background, but now I think it would be great, Sarah, just to give us some context so we can have a little bit of discussion. We won't take a whole lot of time, but just to give us some context of where ODF&W is going with the funding that was just allocated.
Yeah, sure thing. I can do that. I think if Reva and Carl, you tell me how much time I have.
I think we have about 20 minutes for this.
Yeah, I
section,
think if you could get it done in 6 or 7 minutes, that'd be great.
Okay, we're going to do the rapid version, the rapid fire version here. So the context for us, I think, having this conversation is in part to think about what is OCRF's role going forward. We know there was a specific allocation provided to the OCRF with the passage of House Bill 4134, which is the transient lodging tax, or what's referred to as a 1.25% for wildlife funding. And so, we've got an opportunity. You've got one more solicitation coming this winter, right, Reva? And then we probably have a bit of a pause starting for the first part of 2027 through at least the first few quarters. Maybe you're looking at your next solicitation being the winter of 2027-28. And that's in part due to that low remainder of the base program budget. And while we're waiting for, assuming the agency budget is approved, and we're waiting for that revenue from the transient lodging tax to accumulate. And what you get in that pause is an opportunity to take stock of where you've been, with the OCRF program, what we've been funding, where we've been funding, what species, what organizations, where's been the focus, where are the gaps. And one of the questions that came up, I think the last time you all were talking about this is like, well, what's the role of OCRF with the 3 million that we're allocated in the TLT relative to the 60 million that the department's been allocated to finally have the capacity and resources to focus on what historically has just been like OCRF shouldering all of the kind of the non-game and wildlife diversity funding for the agency. So I think what I'm hoping to share with you is just like a really quick drive-by of what the agency has put forward in its agency requested budget for 27-29 for TLT funding, to give you a sense of for the scale and how much now the agency is going to be covering, because I think it frees you up a little bit to think about not feeling like the weight of the world is on your shoulders for all of Oregon's sensitive species, and where can you think strategically about the role for the committee and its slice of the pie. So with that context, I'm just going to share the budget presentation slides. We gave this presentation to the Oregon Fish and Wildlife Commission in Redmond at the end of June. And I will also put in the chat the link to the full presentation recording so you can get more detail from Sean Clements, who presented to the commission. And I'll put the timestamp of when this piece of their presentation occurred, so you can watch the full thing. And this will just be a really abbreviated version of that. As y'all have been talking, and as Shristi said so well at the beginning, this really is a game changer. This really is a historic advancement for conservation in Oregon. The revenue generated from House Bill 4134 and from the lodging tax. That revenue got kind of the 1.25%. This is kind of how it breaks down in allocation. So 3.1 million for the 27-29 biennium to the OCRF. 3.1 million also set aside for wildlife connectivity projects. 1.2 million for wildlife stewardship. So that's dealing with things like human wildlife conflict and education, rehabilitation. And then 55.7 million for the agency to implement the State Wildlife Action Plan and it's in what we call the Recovering Oregon's Wildlife Fund. So that's the part I'm going to primarily focus on. I'm going to zoom through a little bit here. So the vast majority of the Recovering Oregon's Wildlife Fund that the department, we are doing our best here to, in very short order, from the time the bill passed to when we had to have our agency requested budget put together, to kind of lay out a strategy. We sort of have the formula. We sort of know how you can do conservation in Oregon. We've done it before and been really successful at recovering species and habitats. But it kind of follows this no plan do framework, where there's a certain amount of science and monitoring and research and information gathering that you need to do. There's a certain amount of planning and prioritization that you need to do to know where your investments would be most useful. And then the vast majority we put in the do category. This is really about getting money out on the ground, boots on the ground. A certain amount of it does, of course, need to go to just the government support for all of those folks and all of the work on the ground. So there is a little bit allocated for central services. Let's through this. First and foremost, we're going to have this, right now we have 4 wildlife diversity biologists scattered across the state whose responsibility it is to monitor, assess, and take conservation action for Oregon's 300 at-risk species. We now, with these funds, are going to have the opportunity to hire 31 new positions around the state. So it's kind of mind-blowing. These wildlife diversity biologists will be in every watershed district, ODFW watershed district around the state. There'll be more than one in each watershed district. They'll be working hand in hand with the kind of existing, more traditional wildlife diversity biologists and with with the wildlife district biologists and the fish district biologists, the regional habitat biologists. Just really going to be an amazing increase in capacity to address and recover swap species. We're going to do an assessment of all of our wildlife monitoring research and evaluation and data management needs. We're going to contract that work out to really decide what would be the best system for ODFW. We have some critical data gaps for certain species that we're planning just immediate on the ground investments. Species like Wilson's phalarope, Oregon's Vesper sparrow, red tree vole, pygmy rabbit, torrent salamander, white sturgeon. Some of these should be familiar to you. OCRF has certainly funded small projects related to these species in the past, and you can see there will be immediate on the ground investment at pretty large scales for a lot of the species that historically only OCRF was really able to provide funding to address. So that's a huge game changer. We are going to add some statewide specialists. We'll have a bird biologist, a herpetologist, so one that deals with amphibians and reptiles. We'll have a biologist that's focused on small mammals and bats. That's all just so exciting. We'll continue to fund our beaver action plan position. We're going to have some new GIS capacity in the agency, which is always really helpful for all the work that we need to do. A lot of on-the-ground habitat work requires archaeological clearance in order to get the work done on the ground. So we have 2 archaeologists already on staff, if you didn't know that, but this would add a 3rd. And then there's some additional investments in species conservation planning, Columbian sharp-tailed grouse reintroduction, kit fox habitat restoration. And then on the habitat side, we have the opportunity to add more capacity all around the state. We're seeking to add 21 new habitat positions out in the field. We're really excited about this. This will allow us to have 2 habitat biologists in every one of our watershed districts. It allows us to make sure our Farm Bill partner biologists continue to be funding. It makes sure that we are able to keep our Working Lands for Wildlife program going. We're going to be adding a position that focuses on federal lands and partnerships with federal land management agencies for habitat restoration. And then there's some pretty, again, like you can see on this slide, it starts to overwhelm the brain. We've all in conservation been in a mindset of scarcity for a long time in terms of financial resources. And this really flips it on its head and gives us the opportunity to do all sorts of projects, habitat restoration projects in the Portland metro area, Pacific fisher reintroduction in Southwest Oregon, habitat restoration for burrowing owls, invasive species control to benefit the northwestern pond turtle, Klamath bull trout recovery, beaver habitat restoration demonstration projects. So I'm going to probably stop there, but just to say there's discretionary funds that will also be provided to each of the State Wildlife Action Plan ecoregions. So the agency will be strategically deciding how this will be sort of a continuous biennial appropriation of discretionary funds to boost capacity with partners. A lot of this will be passed through. Stay ahead of new challenges, get work done on the ground. There's more specific projects in the nearshore, in the Klamath ecoregion, in the rangelands of Eastern Oregon. And it's all pretty exciting, and it's hard for me to even wrap my mind around. So that's the really quick flyby.
Wow, Sarah, that is mind blowing. Thank you for laying that out. I mean, it really, all of us were involved in the passage of this thing, and I think we all sort of had a sense of that it was going to be good, but it's really nice to see how good it's going to be. And of course, we have to think hard how the OCRF can leverage everything that you're doing. And I imagine, Sarah, you had a lot to do with outlining how that money is being distributed and where it's going to go. And it's quite elegant looking to me, and appreciate the work you put in to figuring that out, because it's going to chart the course for the state. And with all that being said, it is a large yes, considering what we've had in the past. But all of us also know it's still not enough. It's still not enough. And it's going to get us down the road, but it's not enough. And that's in some ways where I think the OCRF can come in. And in my vision of where we have this great amount of money, this baseline funding that we're going to get, but that should allow us to grow that and really have an impact that way. And that's through various partnerships with, whether it's the Oregon Wildlife Foundation, which we've been working on and talking about, whether it's expanding the amount we get through the licensing by very good communications. It's whether we can expand that into the Parks Department, where every time you put a deposit on a campsite, you got the opportunity to donate to the OCRF. I mean, there's a gazillion different ways we can go to leverage that, because again, while it's a huge improvement on what we had, the magnitude of the issues we're up against are dwarf it. And so we have to be thinking in those ways that the OCRF is in a unique position to potentially leverage that, and also inform the other organizations in the state that fund these kind of things. How can we direct funds to get the strategic wildlife action plan implemented? And rather than every organization kind of randomly doing the things they're doing, we have more of a statewide plan of how funding from the nonprofit sector or foundations, how that gets distributed. So those are the kind of things I want us all to be thinking about, and how we can do that, and also other roles for the OCRF in terms of whether we do focused investments, whether we, zero in on one particular issue that is really important to the department, or whether we continue our broad reach. I mean, those are the things. As Sarah said, we're going to have a bit of time to really get strategic, but to get to that point, we all need to be thinking about it, and getting the information that Sarah gives us some background to think about the OCRF in the context of this incredible change. And before I forget, there's one thing, Sarah, that I keep thinking about when I see this money, I see this funding that's coming through, and it's going to go on the ground. You're going to have biologists in all regions of the state, and there's an economic benefit to that, to the communities that money is going to, whether it's the work on the ground, whether it's because now there's more people living in the area and paying taxes. And I can't help but think about the economic benefit that this is going to provide the state beyond the impact on our environment. And if the department, I think it would be worth it. And there are, I know there's at the institutions, there's institutes that do that. They look at the economic impact of certain things, and to, on this early end, start looking at that, saying what did this tax do for the state of Oregon beyond the incredible improvement to habitat and fish and wildlife. I think that there's a real argument to be made that the work that we're all doing and the work the department's doing is an economic boom, and can be a direction to go in the future, as we're looking about economics, as we're getting AI coming and people maybe not being able to find the usual jobs because AI or robots are doing it, there's an opportunity to build an economy in your state around this. And this is like the perfect timing for this to have happened, for us to have gotten this chunk of money that's going to transform the department and transform how we approach natural resources. So those are just the big picture things that I've been thinking about and would like to see us not miss opportunities, you know, to tell those stories and expand what the OCR, maybe that's part of the role of the OCRF. So that's my quick soliloquy there. I see I've got some hands up. Who's number one hand? Oh, Shristi.
Yes, Carl. Couple of thoughts here. One, again, putting on my hat of the advocate here because of the work on this legislation. This fee, this increase is going to show up as nature conservation fee on like a person's receipt when they go and stay at a hotel. It's like it will be line item marked as nature conservation fee. We have made the suggestion to ODF&W in terms of communication, and this might be something that might be helpful even to do for OCRF, as I think this through here in real time, is to have that source reflected. So it's like if some tourist comes to Oregon and Googles, what am I paying for? What is this nature conservation fee? It should show up somewhere where it tells the tourists where the money is going to. And that's true for the big bucket of money, but it's also good to show OCRF in that. So wherever OCRF's landing page is for ODF&W, if the source could be identified and using those key phrases, that's going to show up on people's receipt. That will be really helpful to get the buy-in of tourists. Everybody will support what OCRF does, but it'll be helpful for them to know that's where the money is going. So that's one suggestion. And then other thing, again, in the lines of what Sarah was saying was, I think it's just so many new positions and capacity, and some of this is exactly what we were supporting through our partners, funding projects through OCRF. Maybe that's the part where we need to now take a second look at, is how much of that is going to be covered by ODF&W's incoming new staff, and what would that transition look like, therefore, for OCRF in thinking, therefore, how can we be complementary, right? So like the last presentation is in my mind with the beaver coexistence research they presented, and it's like OCRF has funded a lot of beaver restoration, beaver education, that kind of thing. We haven't funded a whole lot of coexistence things. So if beaver restoration and education becomes part of what ODF&W staff do and can support partners in, is that a sphere where we can step into more actively? So that's an example just from today. I'm using it, but like those are the opportunities that I see for OCRF to still stay true to the mission, but be able to be complementary to ODF&W's growing capacity.
Thank you, Shristi. Jim Hammett?
Sarah, I just wanted to speak, I think, particularly for the southeast part of the state, how important that aspect of liaison with the federal land managers is. With wildlife, it's all about habitat, and with habitat, it's all about stuff on the ground. And the stuff on the ground is not in very good shape in the southeast part of the state, and BLM and the Forest Service know it. But getting that feedback, I think, from the state, which has a constitutional authority to manage wildlife, it could be incredibly effective in getting better management of habitat in our part of the state. And I think the opportunities here with that, and with non-game biologists providing feedback to our federal partners, it could go a long way to make some massive improvements in our part of the world. That's the only thing I just wanted to comment on that.
I don't think that's localized to just the southeast.
Probably not, Carl.
All over the place. So yeah, that's a really good point.
Yes, thank you, Jim.
Anyone else have any thoughts on this? there's a lot to digest and think about, and it's so really wonderful. It's just wonderful. There's nothing else we
Yeah.
can say about it.
We're looking forward, and with Taya's help as she pulls together all of the, project database work, we're really going to have an awesome opportunity to look at where you've been, like I said, take stock of that, what you've funded so far, and then looking forward to where you want to go. We had the strategic planning effort that you did not too long ago, and we can take some time over, working with the co-chairs. We can take some time to design maybe a series of conversations with you all over sort of where you want to go and where we want to head from here. I will say that where I've seen OCRF's leadership the strongest, and where I think it will still need to be an important part of the puzzle, is the amount of community engagement, partnership with community organizations, particularly underrepresented groups, the way in which OCRF has engaged with local communities, I think is still a very important niche role for OCRF. And I hope that we can keep that function still very much alive. I still see some really amazing opportunities for leadership from the OCRF on that front.
Thank you, Sarah. I think that is a really unique role that we've been able to be very effective in that space, and trying to keep that going and maintain that. How is the department looking? How does the department view Oregon Wildlife Foundation in terms of its relationship with them?
Yeah, it's, really amazing partnership between the department and Oregon Wildlife Foundation. There's a lot of ongoing conversations about growing that partnership and that relationship between OWF and the department. There's some ongoing marketing campaigns that are led by the director's office that they're involved with OWF on. They're a wonderful partner. I think a frontier that I think is really good for OCRF to keep the conversation going is with organizations like the Roundhouse Foundation, the Oregon Community Foundation, folks that have reached out to us over time and said, hey, we love how robust your technical review is in OCRF. We love how how you have this amazing list of projects that are vetted. We know you can't fund them all. Can we take a look at your, at your projects, and can we partner with you on those? And I think there's some great opportunities for us there to look at expanding those types of partnerships. And between our ODFW staff that do a technical review and the members of this committee that also do their own review in order to objectively, transparently rank and score projects, I think that's of real interest to a lot of foundations. And so I think it'll be good to explore how we can expand on those relationships.
And we're fortunate enough to have the pioneer in that right here on our committee, where Jane
That's right.
and have just done amazing. That's what showed us the way of where that can go with what Jane and her husband have done. It's just been really powerful, and we really appreciate that. And to further that, I was invited to the Oregon Community Foundation to a presentation on the state of Oregon philanthropy. It was someone from Eco Northwest that does economic analysis, and they looked at philanthropy in the state of Oregon and how it's not very coherent, and there's a lot of opportunities to make it more coherent. And I was able to have conversations with people in the OCF about that very thing about, looking at our process that Sarah pointed out. It's quite robust, and that's where I was talking about trying to get the state on all the different organizations that fund these kinds of things sort of on the same page. So those opportunities are definitely there, and those of you that maybe know folks in those the bigger foundations that could reach out and have those discussions. I mean, those are the things to do as we're gearing up for the new age, and I think the OCRF can be a really big piece of that. So, all right, well, that's a lot to think about, and a lot of exciting things, very gratifying. Does anyone else have any further comments on all that? Or are we ready to move on? I think we're looking pretty good. So actually moving on is getting to the end here. I don't have any particular closing comments other than what we just talked about. Anyone else have anything to, Reva, is there any other business we need to attend to?
So Carl, you had asked me to do a summary of the committee's round robin discussion from May, which I could do now, or we could move it to the next meeting if, because we kind of talked a lot about it just now. We hit a lot of those points.
Yeah, we're running a bit late. So why don't we just hold, I mean, that was a good conversation we just had. And
it was, yeah.
And maybe you can combine this conversation with that conversation and come up with
okay.
That might be powerful. It's really, I think, important to keep track of this stuff, Reva, because you can't, some great ideas come up and we forget about them. And the committee has, already brought up some wonderful things. So I appreciate you doing what you did with that conversation we had before. And if you can do that with this one, that'll keep us on task, and we can expand on things we discussed. So there, I think that's, I think we're in a good place to kind of move the committee forward in the future. So, okay,
sounds good.
If there's nothing else, then we can, so nobody else has anything. I don't see any hands. All right, great. Then we can adjourn and look forward to our next meeting. Thank you all for your input and your insights. And Sarah, thank you so much for being here for the whole meeting. We really appreciate it.
Well, appreciate everybody's participation, and you all are the most amazing group.
Will say we have an amazing group. It's also Ronaldo with us here. Thank you so much. All right. See ya.
Thanks, everybody.